Hello YouTube! Well, a while back we did a video on why Sam Harris is always wrong, and today we're going to visit this and explain why he's still always wrong. So specifically we talked about his attempt to get an ought from an is, which he proposed in a series of tweets. I should just remind you of the argument. Premise 1, let's assume there are no oughts or shoulds in the universe. There is only what is, the totality of actual and possible facts. 2, among the myriad things that exist are conscious minds susceptible to a vast range of actual and possible experiences. 3, unfortunately, many experiences suck. And they don't just suck as a matter of cultural convention or personal bias. They really and truly suck. If you doubt this, place your hand on a hot stove and report back. Number 4, conscious minds are natural phenomena. Consequently, if we were to learn everything there is to know about physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, economics, etc., we would know everything there is to know about making our corner of the universe suck less. Premise 5, if we should do anything in this life, we should avoid what really and truly sucks. If you consider this question begging, consult your stove as above. And then there's a couple of tweets that aren't really key to the overall argument, and then he concludes, so what is morality? What ought sentient beings like ourselves do? Understand how the world works, facts, so that we can avoid what sucks, values. So,
well, a number of philosophers have tried to explain to Sam Harris why this is still question begging and why he has not in any way disproven or closed the is-ought gap. He hasn't found a bridge for that gap. So it's clear he can't be reasoned with at this point, I think. Incidentally, I have consulted my hot stove as per premise 5, because I do still think it's question begging. We've reasoned to that conclusion together. So as per his advice, if you think this is still question begging, consult your hot stove. I did that, not deliberately, I might add. I was trying to make pasta, so nobody thinks I'm an insane person. And I slipped and had an accident that you guys can all see now. But I think that counts as consulting your hot stove, right? What do you think, Kane?
I believe that's quite right, yes.
It's been thoroughly consulted.
I mean, Harris, to be fair, let's be fair to him, because people will say if I don't point this out, then they're going to accuse us of straw manning him. He does actually say place your hand on a hot stove and report back, but I feel like getting stuff on the back is worse. So
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't really know. Oh, and look, that's what reasonable people do when they don't know. They say it's hard to say. I don't really know. But I can say, like, I definitely communed with my stove. I had many thoughts about my stove. I thought about how we used to torture people this way and how that would have been very painful. I thought about many things. I learned many things that night, like don't have slippy rugs in your kitchen, but always turn your pot handles to the back so you don't smack them when you slip on your slippy rug in your kitchen. But one thing I did not learn in my communing with my stove, or my consultation with my stove, was why the hell this wasn't question begging. And I think both you and I get that he means this pretty cheekily, maybe. Is that an okay way to phrase it? How would you put it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm aware that this is not supposed to be a sophisticated part of the argument.
It's the only parentheses we have in deductive reasoning, they count and they matter and they're part of the argument, and they don't have words in them. They have symbolic logic in them. But we can assume that there's a reason his tweet is parenthetical at this point, and it's that it's a bit of a throwaway or just a snarky remark. But it's doing work for him. He wants it to. He needs this hot stove to some degree, right? And he wants you to have the outcome that he's prescribing here. It's supposed to have some kind of persuasive power. Otherwise, he wouldn't have included it. And if you want to take out David Hume, if you want to take out the is-ought gap, you should expect your argument to be scrutinized. That's it for now. So we did scrutinize it, I think, as best we could. And we came out with a few different interpretations. You're going to have to lead with that, Kane, because I don't have them in front of me because I'm just... Yeah, I've got my gorgeous stove consultation on display.
So we did wonder what exactly it is that Harris is getting at in this particular part of his tweet. So again, it's if we should do anything in this life, we should avoid what really and truly sucks. And then he says in parentheses, if you consider this question begging, consult your stove as above. Now, the way that Cole initially took a stab at formalizing this was... what he's really saying in these premises, in this premise, the argument that he's trying to give in these parentheses is premise 1, if you consider this question begging, then consult your stove, as above. Premise 2, I consult my stove, therefore... As I've done. It's not question begging. That was how you initially took the...
Yeah, it seems like a pretty straightforward... I mean, I'm not sure how else it could be persuasive without being, while still being somewhat logical, right? I tried to formalize it in a kind of traditional sense, rather than assuming he was resorting to threats or something like that. But it's not only obviously fallacious logically, because affirming the consequent does not get you to that conclusion, but it's also evidentially really problematic. Having consulted my hot stove, I still think his argument's question begging. Sorry, I stammered a little there. It's a bit chilly, I should say. I still think it's question begging, but additionally, they have nothing to do with each other. It's just a total non sequitur. Why would my consideration of an argument that is circular and begs the question have anything to do with my relationship to a hot stove? So I did not come to the conclusion that he wants to say is logically necessary in that version of the formalization. You had a different one for us, though.
Yeah, so I saw it a little bit differently because the way I saw that little bit in the parentheses was like this. Premise 1, if you consider this question begging, then consult your stove and then you will no longer consider it question begging. So just to be clear, this is not, the way that I'm putting this is not really a properly formalized argument, and it's making a temporal claim. So it's making a causal claim, right? Like the effect of you consulting a hot stove will be that you no longer consider it question begging. So again, here it is again.
Really problematic because total non sequitur.
If you consider the argument question begging, then consult your stove and then you will no longer consider it question begging. So then the next premise would be something like X considers it question begging and then X has consulted the stove and no longer considers it question begging. I mean, that's what Harris is going for there, right? The idea is that all the people who consult their stove no longer consider the argument question begging. And the obvious problem there is, well, as we've already mentioned, the stove has been consulted and it hasn't had the relevant effect. And I mean, even if it did have the relevant effect, it wouldn't actually do anything to show that his overall argument is sound. It
would just show that I didn't like being burned by my stove.
Well, I mean, you didn't like being burned by your stove, but it would show that your rational capacities had perhaps been
compromised?
hijacked or compromised, yes, by the experience of pain or fear or whatever, which is not that surprising. So yeah.
Yeah, so it might be
not a very
rhetorically
convincing
useful
point.
in that sense, because humans do tend to have that kind of response, especially to pain, and maybe that's why he chose it as an example, because it does kind of hijack your reasoning capacity. Not this gal. I'm a champ. Um, but is another way it could be persuasive. I felt like we had a third possible way.
So I did point out. Oh, is this another one that you sent me, or was this what I said?
No, I sent you one that was me attempting to get down what you were
Oh,
saying to me
right.
because
No, so
really this is a terrible thing to include in an argument.
no, the third thing that I'd said was, well, I think that Harris is really just meaning this in a kind of colloquial and, like we said, cheeky sort of way. It's not even supposed to be presented as like a formal argument in the way that we have just been attempting. And, you know, maybe
But
it
something that's
is.
meant to be persuasive but not logical
Well,
is
yeah, I mean, there is
illicitly
rhetoric,
rhetorical.
yeah. But it's like, hey, just imagine doing this, right? Imagine putting your hand on a hot stove, or not even imagine it. Have it happen to you like Cole did, right? And then you will just see the like existence of a kind of normative should in the experience itself. Like if you think about a terrible experience, a painful experience, right? That just like carries the badness in it. It's not to be doneness, right? You will see the not to be doneness in the way that the experience sucks.
Yeah, and nowhere in my being essentially bedridden for the past week, or in my spur of the moment consultation with the stove, did I find objective moral principles. Those didn't suddenly appear to me in the world. There's no way that having a negative experience or consulting a negative experience should have this sort of persuasive power. The only way it's going to have persuasive power again is through illicit rhetoric, which is distinctly not reasoning. It is not philosophy. It's good writing, maybe, but the other argument I was thinking of was actually any of the arguments from emotion, right? In this case, you had mentioned an argument from force or threat.
Yeah.
Which of course is part rhetoric and part fallacious argument. But I think you had like formalized it in a way that I can do better than I can when I'm looking at my wall.
Well, I don't actually remember this part of our conversation. I do remember saying
You're just so overwhelmed by this catastrophe.
I do remember saying that it reminded me of the argument. Well, basically when somebody just says, believe in God or I'll shoot you. It's a similar kind of thing. But
yeah, except that this isn't begging the question or get hurt effectively. And while that's probably the least charitable of the interpretations we could come up with, it is indeed, at least to that point, an argument. It's just an erroneous and fallacious one.
So, those were the ways that we thought about taking that particular part in the parentheses. But in any case, the general point is, however you interpret it, the stove has been consulted, and Sam Harris is still always wrong.